Let me ask you something straight up. Have you ever felt like you were doing everything right, and yet something just fell apart? The conversation flowed. You were polite, intelligent, and articulate. But at some point, her gaze would change. The answers were getting shorter. Interest was slipping through one's fingers, and you never quite understood why. The worst part is that if someone asked you, you'd have excellent arguments. You know how to communicate. He knows how to listen. Can you explain what you feel, what you think, who you are? You don't play video games. You are consistent, rational, correct. And yet, it has already been ignored. There's a kind of silent frustration in that, because it is not the irresponsible, confused, or immature man who experiences this conflict. It's quite the opposite. He is the man who trusts in his own intelligence as if it were an automatic bridge to desire. But here's the uncomfortable part. Perhaps the intelligence you use to get closer is the same intelligence that creates distance. Have you ever noticed how at certain times you feel an almost automatic need to explain? Explain what you meant. Explain your intention. Explain why you said that. Explain that it wasn't a game. Explain that it's different. Explain that it makes sense. And while you're organizing everything in your head, something happens in her body. It's not conscious. It's not rational. It's subtle. The tension decreases. The mystery evaporates. Emotional scarcity disappears. Attraction doesn't respond to logic. She reacts to the sensation. You may be absolutely right. You may have the best argument. He might be the most coherent man in the room. But desire doesn't stem from consistency. It stems from emotional impact, and that's hard to accept when you've always been valued for thinking things through. When your identity was built on being the guy who understands, who explains, who solves problems. However, in the dynamics of attraction, understanding too much is not an automatic advantage. There is a silent difference between real value and perceived value. And often the intelligent man tries to increase the perceived value by explaining, as if by organizing everything into words, she would feel it more. But feelings don't follow instructions. Women sense it first. Then, if it makes sense, they understand. When you reverse that order, something breaks. Not because you made a mistake, but that's because you tried to guide emotion with reason. And perhaps you've already experienced this without ever naming it. That feeling that the more available, of course, and accessible you were, the less impact you had. The harder you tried to be understood, the less wanted you seemed. This doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It simply means there's an invisible trap here. A trap that intelligent men fall into precisely because they trust their own logic too much. And if you feel you've been in that position before, of doing everything right, saying everything right, and still feeling the interest slipping away, so it's worth continuing, because what really happens at that moment, it's not obvious yet. There comes a point where you need to be honest with yourself. If you keep reacting the same way, over-explaining, constantly trying to be understood, nothing changes. It just repeats itself. The same conversations, the same coldness, the same unanswered question at the end. Change doesn't begin when someone shows up. It begins when you decide to take a different stance, even if you feel uncomfortable, less proving, more supporting, less justifying, more presence. Perhaps you already know this deep down. You just need to accept it. Some people write this in silence, others leave a sign. A short word that marks a turning point. And when you like and subscribe, it's not because of the video itself. It's like saying to yourself, I'm not going to repeat the same pattern. Those who understand feel. Perhaps now you're beginning to recognize the exact moment when interest starts to wane. It's not after a big mistake. It's not after something offensive. It's in a subtle detail. An almost invisible adjustment in your behavior, which you repeat without realizing it, thinking you're deepening the connection, when in reality you're diluting silent, constant, repetitive, daily tension. You feel the urge to explain why you care, to make it clear that you're not playing games, to show intent. And the more you explain, the more predictable it becomes. Predictability breeds comfort, but excessive comfort doesn't breed desire. It breeds neutrality. It creates that lukewarm feeling where nothing goes wrong, but nothing pulsates. That's when interest starts to fade, little by little. Notice how often you ask if it makes sense, as if the attraction needed to agree with you. But desire doesn't debate. It doesn't analyze, it doesn't vote. It responds to what is felt in the moment. When you seek intellectual validation, you surrender emotional control of the interaction to it, reducing tension, mystery, and impact without you even realizing it at the exact moment. Responding too quickly may seem like caring, but it's often disguised anxiety. It's like saying without words that you're always available, always accessible, always ready. And total availability eliminates scarcity. Without emotional scarcity, there's no room for curiosity to grow. It doesn't feel lack, it doesn't imagine, it doesn't project. Everything is there, open, explained, predictable, safe, comfortable, stable, neutral, still, empty. The mistake was never the content of your speech. It was the energy behind it, the way you position yourself emotionally while speaking. When you speak to relieve your own internal tension, the other person feels it. And that feeling is not attractive because it transfers weight, expectation, pressure, urgency, veiled neediness, even without conscious intention or explicit words spoken beforehand. There is a difference between presence and effort. Presence is comfortable silence, calm direction, a steady gaze. Effort is an excess of words, justifications, and explanations. One creates tension, the other dissolves it. And almost always, the intelligent man chooses the second, believing that he's being mature, responsible, clear, secure, stable, reliable, correct, logical, predictable, accessible, available, constant, linear, obvious, controllable, comfortable, common, and forgettable. Women don't lose interest because of a lack of respect or clarity. They lose interest when they stop feeling something physically, when there's no more tension, curiosity, or slight uncertainty. When everything is explained before it's even experienced. Attraction needs space, time, silence, absence, pause, expectation, rhythm, contrast, presence, firmness, autonomy, choice, direction, boundaries, energy, intention, focus, strength, and grounding. Perhaps you realize now that it's not about speaking less strategically, but about feeling less urgency for approval. It's an internal adjustment, a silent decision. You don't change to convince someone. You change because you understand your own value. Even when it's unexplained, unvalidated, unacknowledged, unguaranteed, unassured, unasked for, unnegotiated, undiscussed, unrationalized, unproven. And that changes everything about how you enter a conversation. You don't try to win. You don't try to be understood. You simply are. And that presence creates something that no explanation can sustain for long. It's felt, not discussed. It's perceived, not analyzed. It's emotional, not logical. It's alive, unstable, pulsating, unpredictable, intense, silent, firm, magnetic, direct, raw, real, present. If something here touched a sensitive point, perhaps it's time to mark that moment. Some people write it down so they don't forget. Others choose a simple word, something that represents decision, presence, direction, silence. Choose yours and leave it there. Because the next part begins exactly from there, where everything changes, repositions itself, reveals itself, is tested, is sustained, is felt, deepens. The invisible correction begins when you stop fighting against who you are and adjust only the place from which you act. It's not about abandoning intelligence. It's about removing it from its role as an emotional shield. Because every time you over-explain, deep down you're trying to protect yourself from a simple and uncomfortable possibility, not being chosen at that moment. There's a quiet moment when you feel the urge to talk more, to clarify, to organize, to make sure she understands exactly who you are. This impulse seems noble, but it almost always stems from anxiety, not from presence. And when you speak to relieve internal tension, the other person feels it, even without being able to explain why. Direction is different from explanation. Direction is when you lead without asking for emotional permission. You decide the rhythm, the tone, the moment, not to control, but because you trust. Justification, on the other hand, reveals internal doubt. It's as if you were asking permission to exist there, and desire doesn't respond well to requests. The less you try to prove your worth, the more value is perceived. Because what truly sustains attraction isn't what you say about yourself, but how much you respect yourself when no one is validating you. Self-respect is silent. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't explain itself. It simply manifests in how you occupy space, speak, listen, and choose. There is strength in not answering everything right away, in letting pauses breathe, in allowing tension to exist without being resolved immediately. Attraction grows in this space, in light doubt, in expectation, in not knowing completely. When you give everything at once, there's nothing left to feel afterward. Speaking when it adds emotion changes everything, because your words cease to be an attempt at control and become expression. You don't speak to convince. You speak because you are aligned, and when it doesn't add value, you remain silent, not as a technique, as a natural consequence of someone who doesn't need to explain themselves to feel secure. If you feel the urge to over-explain, remain silent, not as a rigid rule, but as an internal observation. Ask yourself where this urge comes from. Fear of losing, anxiety about pleasing, a need to be understood now. This pause is already the correction happening. Women don't lose interest because you're intelligent. They lose interest when they realize your intelligence is trying to compensate for something that should come from your body, your posture, your presence. When the mind steps in to save what energy can't sustain, desire fades. Perhaps you're realizing that maintaining interest doesn't require doing more. It requires doing less of what isn't necessary. Less talk, less effort, less proof, more decision-making, more direction, more self-respect even when the other person hasn't confirmed anything yet. This doesn't guarantee immediate results. It guarantees internal consistency. And it's this consistency that completely changes how you are perceived. Not because you changed what you say, but because you changed the perspective from which you say it. And this will only deepen. If this moment marked something in you, some people leave a sign, a simple word like clarity, presence, or decisiveness. Not for me, for you.